noises, which means everybody's being really good about being quiet in the background. But hopefully we'll be able to introduce ourselves. We're kicking off actually our fourth community practice call. Many of you have been on one or two or none, possibly all four. And we're going to have this is an hour and a half. This is our first time we've made an hour and a half. And there's a lot of information to cover. So we're really happy to have that time with everyone. And we're going to just start with some introductions. So what I want to do, because we're virtual, but we still want to build a community, is say our name, and then something interesting we learned related to data recently, like any one thing. So this is Jamie, as you know, all know from Cloudburst, and I heard this amazing NPR talk on the book called Dope Sick, just came out about opioid crisis, and the woman has been investigating it for since it began in the late 1990s, I believe, 10 years. It's really brilliant, and she talked about the pharmaceutical company that was one of the cornerstones from Connecticut, my home state, in Stanford, and they have actually made $30 billion off of that OxyContin prescription drug. But it's amazing how they created the marketing schema to actually promote the use in a way that led to the crisis we're living at now. So that's my number for today, is 30 billion. How about we do the Cloudburst team? So Rachel?
Hi, my name is Rachel. I work as a contractor at Cloudburst with Jamie. An interesting thing I learned about data was actually today, some of the secondary data sources that we're going to go over, specifically the eviction lab data. I wasn't aware of that database, and I'm really excited to explore it later on the call.
Cool. So Ross, do you want to go down by names? Can you see people's names? Why don't you introduce yourself also, Ross, because you're with us, and then maybe call people by name?
Sure. I'm Ross. I work with Jamie and Rachel, helping out on the technical back end of these calls. I'm trying to think of something data related that I've learned recently. Maybe I'll come back at the end, but I can't think of anything at the moment. I think if we want to go down the list, the first person is D. Norton.
Yeah, hi, I'm here. I am with the Road Home. I'm the Director of Housing and Impact. Been at the agency for 18 years in a number of positions. And you're just looking for an interesting data fact that we have?
Yeah, anything. Yep, a recent one. And you're in Utah, so you want to name your state. You're the Road Homes in Utah.
Yeah, Road Homes in Utah, Salt Lake City. We are the largest provider of direct services to homeless individuals in the state, offering shelter services. We provided shelter to over 900 people in our shelter system last night, and we also run a significant portion of the housing that is offered for homeless individuals in our community, and we had approximately 1,500 people in our housing last night.
Wow, good data, very good data. Thanks, Dee.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Melissa. I don't see a last name, but.
Hey, Melissa.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Melissa Wall. I work as a contractor with the Indianapolis COC on their data integration project. And on another project I work on, looking at early learning and education, we have started digging into grandparents in households census data and seeing how many grandparents are raising their children and discussing why and often the opioid epidemic. So that was today.
Thanks, Melissa.
And then we have Michelle Flynn.
Hi, everyone. This is Michelle Flynn, also with the Road Home in Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm working with Dee here on our shelter and housing programs. And I'm going to share a stat that I got from Dee a couple days ago. We had about 1,000 people in our sheltering system in the first week, one night in the first week of September. And of that, 220 of them were 55 years or older. And so one of the things we've been looking at is this increasing number of elderly people in the sheltering system and what their particular needs are and what kind of partnerships we need to develop to address those needs.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I want to ask really quickly, like, why 55 is a cutoff? Why did you start looking at 55? I'm just interested. It's a number I hear a lot.
Yeah, so I think, well, this data poll came from a request from a staff person that's at the county in the county's Division of Aging Services. But some of the housing that we have available is available to people age 55 or older. Some of it is available to people in older age categories, but the lowest for that population starts at 55. So we generally look at 55 and older and then can break it down into subcategories of that population.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's linked to housing potential. Good. Thanks. Who's next?
Then the last one I see who's called in is Tim Huffman. Doesn't look, oh, yeah, you are connected. There you are.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. My name's Tim Huffman. I'm a professor at St. Louis University, and I partner with a variety of organizations here in St. Louis, but am specifically on this because of a regional initiative to kind of integrate across half a dozen COCs around St. Louis and get our data and strategy and services interoperable. And I'm going to go a little bit more abstract. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues today about data and data literacy, and we were talking about how it's not only being able to see and understand data that is in front of you, but understand what could be and how data helps us imagine what's possible in the world. So it's interpretation is both being able to have attention to what is, but also attention to what could be.
Well, there we have it, our philosophy for the data group. Thanks, Tim. Is anyone else on the called in on the phone, not on their computer, not showing up on the computer? Okay, great. So our Virginia people, I talked to them earlier in the week, and they're right in the beeline for the storm. So I know that folks from Richmond and from Hampton, Norfolk area are busy with their evacuation processes, or they would be with us. And I don't know what happened to our Orlando people. And we also invited San Diego folks to the table. And also, Rachel, we should make note to make sure we invited the San Diego people to the table, because I'm not exactly positive about that. But anyway, this is a great group. Actually, I like small groups. And so we're going to go through this beginning part fairly quickly. I'm not sure how many of you, if any of you, were on. Andrea Miller did a really great presentation on disaggregating data for racial inequities. And she zipped through a toolkit that we then sent out to everyone. Did anyone get a chance to use it by any chance?
We at the Road Home have not had the chance to put our information into, or our data into that toolkit yet. We're looking forward to doing so, but just have not had the chance to do so.
Okay, yeah.
And I'll just add on to that. Sorry, Jamie. Yeah. I'm just going to add on to that. At our at the COC board meeting last week, we discussed not this tool specifically, but we agreed to, as a board, to do this as one of our primary objectives over this next few months, is to focus on the racial disparities and dig into that information. So we were presented at the board by just that very simple data that HUD is requiring in the COC application this year, and that spurred this conversation. So I feel good about using this toolkit going forward.
Okay, and we would love to hear back from you in Utah. And I know that Margot and Rebecca were going to use it in Virginia in their site. Also, I know that they were also under the gun with vacations and the whole NOFA, even though it was a requirement. But anyway, that we would love to hear back any feedback because it's an iterative toolkit also. So any feedback you have would be fantastic to continue this, and we'll continue to be sharing it on our site. We'll get it up on the site. That's the other thing, Rachel, to remember. We need to get the racial and equity toolkit on the Data to Action site. We're going to promote the Data to Action site to everybody soon, but we're going to make sure it's all up to date before we do. And that's our URL that everybody has, which has all these the resources that we've been presenting on it. And so we'll get that out by email to everyone and as we continue forward. But this is kind of a mid-session for us. We're booked out now through December. So Rachel came up with a really wonderful evaluation tool, an online survey she worked really hard at. She sent it out to everybody. Not one person responded back to her. So this is an opportunity now to redeem yourselves for Rachel's work and just give her ideas on some of these key questions. It will help us. You don't have to go too far, but it will help us as we plan out the next. We have already the next one planned for October, but we have November, December still ahead of us. So we'd love to hear a little bit of feedback, not too much, but a little bit. But Rachel?
Hi, this is Rachel. We did get one response, Jamie, but they're anonymous, so I don't know who to give the award to. But here are some of the key questions that were from that Google Forms questionnaire. So we thought it would be easiest just to touch on a few during this call. So first, we kind of wanted to get your feedback on how relevant the community practice has been to your daily work activities so far. I'd just like to open that up to discussion. If anyone has any comments. No comments related to that. And we've heard already about the utilization of the racial and equity toolkit, but what about some of the other things that were put forward? For example, the performance management tools that Sarah presented two sessions ago. Anybody had a chance to use those?
I'm sorry from Utah that we don't have our HMIS people on the phone right now, and so they would be probably best to answer those questions.
Okay, no, that's fine. Why don't we skip right ahead then to brainstorming any future topics that you would like to be focused on for the upcoming sessions? Anyone have any ideas? Or are there any specific data-related challenges that you're experiencing in your site that we could perhaps address in a session?
So many.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that.
Somebody go.
Go ahead.
We, of course, have data challenges that we're looking at and trying to figure out how to find the time to work with. It's just figuring out how to narrow them down to, like, I don't know, conceptualize what that challenge would be. Like, we have a ton of data that is collected. Our HMI systems in which the data is collected from is not particularly forthcoming with getting that information out of it in regularly and accessible reports. So we have had to develop an internal database guru who can extract that data and then use it. But what concerns me is that we are often having to almost find or shape the data in a way that makes sense to us, but may not be the same way that would be how HUD or our HMIS vendor or the state or our other stakeholders might shape the same data. So lots of data, lots of ways to potentially look at it, and not having a consistent way to always look at it with which to know the standards by which that data should be shaped.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, challenges surrounding interoperability between the various systems and their requirements, and getting the reports generated. Yeah, that's feedback we've heard from a variety of sites.
Another one that we are looking at as a community is there is a cross-section of, well, a number of stakeholders are trying to find this cross-section of information that is based out of HMIS that also can be matched up with information from the criminal justice system that can also then be matched up with the behavioral health system, so that you can find those high utilizers of all three systems. And I think our community is at the point where we have a strong interest in making that work move forward, but it's the retroactive data that we have was not collected in a way that had the releases of information that would authorize it to be used in new ways moving forward. So if we wanted to do something, we could not use old data necessarily because the clients did not give client level data options to be used in that way. But moving forward, we could change the system to authorize new usages of that data. But it's kind of hard to, find the usage of that data moving forward if we can't really access the old data either. So there's discussions that will be happening about how and where and why we could potentially use that data, but how do you make that work with what the clients have accepted and authorized that data to be used for?
Jamie, are there any lessons learned from your experience creating dashboards that we could incorporate in a future session related to those issues surrounding release of information?
Well, in all of the sites, the work that we're doing around data integration is related, and we're connecting to each site in a different way around that. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think we're going to do that inside the work. Like even as you speak to I know Green River's doing the work on the court, maybe doing the work, the contract signed on the coordinated entry for the counties, and so there's a conversation that should be had with the capacity, and obviously it's all built on trust after that, legal trust, but the capacity for the Green River engineering to take in data and mash it up so that the identity is protected and de-identified after that match has happened. So I don't know what that means, and I know even for a system to share the data, the permissioning has to happen legally. But if the output is all de-identified, then and it's protected, it's just a conversation to be had with Green River on that, because I have heard that. I have heard them talk about it. I don't fully understand it, but there may be a technology response that could be possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
I believe there's multiple projects going on. One is including Green River, and I believe that piece of it we can probably make work with the de-identified information to mash the data and then turn it into something usable. But this is actually a secondary, side related project, but they would ideally like to feed back to, say, the jail system as they're doing releases of people from the jails, and say, oh, we recognize that you specifically, from client identified information, you have a long history with behavioral health system and the homeless system. Before we release you, here is a tailored release plan for you. So it would very much have to include identified data, which of course complicates the matter.
Right, going backwards, right. Of course. But I was just trying to think of a way to get that going backwards, because you need the history of folks, but it is for the people who are currently in the system. Anyway, to be honest, also we are getting HUD is also seeing the work being done on data integration and wants to see that happen for the highest level communities. Is going to support some of these projects to happen, and so there's a lot happening around this issue that I think Utah's always there in the forefront. So I don't, yeah. So anyway, there's a lot more to come on that actually won't be necessarily in this community practice, but will be in the project site around that, which is exciting. It's really exciting, actually. But I understand the hesitancy of committing to how else can the community practice happen, because it takes a while for community practice to really feel like it's peer driven, which we're not there yet, but that is the goal, right? And I'm not sure how that actually happens, even, to tell you the truth. But yeah. In the meantime, anyone else have other ideas? Back to Rachel's good question. what else we could further explore in upcoming community practice topics.
Or any knowledge briefs that we could develop that would be useful for your sites on specific data challenges?
Okay, I'm going to market the next one because the next one is super incredible around shared housing. And we're going to have to link it to data, but we haven't done it. But Rachel and I just completed a white paper for SAMHSA on shared housing with environmental scan of different models out there. And also we have a knowledge brief based developed on that. But it is to motivate the use of shared housing, sharing the promising practices we found doing a pretty extensive environmental scan across the country. So we're going to be sharing that next community practice with everyone. And we're also walking down the pike of getting the toolkit funded by Hilton Foundation based on that, because SAMHSA is upside down kind of agency right now. But anyway, that just this week, that white paper was just finalized. So you will get that in the next community practice, which will be really, really great. Just really great, yeah. Because we've all got to get into play as many housing options as possible, like what is possible right now. And shared housing is one of those. So you'll be really excited to hear what's been done in other parts of the country that you can apply now, wherever you are. So I think, Rachel, it's okay to take like the mid-session evaluation and move into to our next slide, whatever that may be.
Yep, no, I agree.
Okay, we'll go forward because we have a lot more to come in upcoming community practice, but today we're going to start looking at what I think is one of the most critical pieces on using data. So really exploring data limitations and seeing what we can do with secondary data sets, both in helping to understand context and also to understand our own limitations in concluding data results. So, everybody on the call already gets this, but we just need to remind everyone how important it is to be looking at like what's underlying the data, what's underlying what we're looking at. Not everyone has dashboards up and running. Utah doesn't yet. Tim has some in hand. Virginia has them in hand. Indianapolis doesn't yet. But when you're looking in the dashboards, that you get the chance to both the dashboards or any kind of data report you're pulling out of HMIS, which I've never done myself, but you're able to put a time range, right, between the data you're looking at and the data you're pulling out. And so often we are looking at a time range that is much shorter than it would ever take for any kind of initiative to have impact. So we're just touching quickly on these issues to make sure you're keeping this in mind when you're looking at your data. Both in the time horizon, also in the small subgroup size, like this is a big concern we have with our dashboards, actually, because if you can get results by filtering out and get results for maybe 25 people if you filter out by a bunch of different variables, and then you could start drawing conclusions based on that very small number of people you're looking at. And so this particular, the small subgroup size for us in the dashboards is really important. It's also important for people in their total number of people who are in homelessness, total number of people in your programs, like really looking at denominators, scrutinizing denominators whenever you're reporting out. And undercounts, one of the biggest undercounts that's happening now nationally is I'm working on a project with the Arnold Foundation. It's funded with MDRC, a big national firm that does randomized controlled trials, and it's focusing on frequent utilizers with substance use. So that's a population everybody's concerned about. And our three sites are Chicago, Philadelphia, and Richmond. And Chicago has really invested, not Chicago, Philadelphia has really invested as a city in the opioid addiction impact. And they're the first ones to connect housing first with the opioid addiction response. So they've invested in 2 teams now, hundreds of thousands of dollars to house that chronically homeless population with opioid addiction. They're doing that with the Pathways to Housing Philadelphia site and team. But because of this project, what we're uncovering is in all of our sites that the people with long-term homelessness and opiate addiction are not always in our HMI system or new opiate addiction. And our undercounts of even who's not in our system to be determined to be actually experiencing homelessness in our community. And for me, it's just been an eye-opener for that unsheltered population. Not doubling up, we hear a lot about that, but really this place where the unsheltered, how many of those people, especially that people with severe substance use, who are not necessarily touching the HMI system or program type. So just keeping those caveats in mind. Any other examples come to mind from any of these three different data limitation topics? Okay, how about here? Has anybody here figured out or thought out a conclusion based on HMI's data, which would be a single source of data? That would be all of us, right? It would be all of us on the call here.
Yes.
But can anybody draw an experience of how that turned out to be not true, or how you had to dig deeper by some conclusion that was drawn based on HMI's data alone?
Well, an easy one would be our community uses our HMI system for the collection of most of the counts that we have for the number of people that are experiencing homelessness in the community, but it is not inclusive of every data source or every provider of homeless services. So we have faith-based organizations, domestic violence organizations, and who do not contribute into HMIS directly. So when the point in time count comes, they try to get as much participation there, but we know that we're always missing the number of people, and then being able to extrapolate that into an annual number from a point in time number is kind of a challenge for our community as well. So we know we're missing data. The I don't know, multipliers don't always add up, and so we're always making wild guesses, it feels like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. On the total number of people who are actually literally homeless in your community.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Any other examples come to mind?
I think of when we're looking at trends. So like we have our family shelter and we have motels that we use for families, and we went through a period of time where we had a huge increase in the number of motel rooms that we needed. And lots of people were drawing lots of different reasons or causes for that, from basically just the numbers of families that were coming in and out of shelter, and whether or not diversion was a part of that or not a part of that, and that's why the reason it went up, or housing costs, or all these other reasons. There were some that were drawing conclusions like, well, rapid rehousing doesn't work because the number of families keeps increasing, so we're not getting people housed in the way that we should, so some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, and then what happens is then rapid rehousing doesn't work, or diversion's not working, or that anecdotal stuff really spins out quickly. And then how do you handle it as far as the data? How would you handle that, Michelle, or how do you handle it now?
Well, I think we try and dig in a little bit more to the interventions like diversion and rapid rehousing, and talk about what the constraints are in those systems. One of the immediate reactions from people are, okay, we need more money because we need more money to go into motels. And then that draws from the resources we could use for rapid rehousing. So I think one of the things we tried to do was to talk about what is working with rapid rehousing and to have the funding be flexible so that it could pay for either motels or rapid rehousing. So we could ramp up in one area and then be able to decrease in the other area. So ramping up in rapid rehousing, decreasing the number of dollars we need to spend on motels. And I think that has ended up being successful for us because that funding now is, we have a lot more money for rapid rehousing. So then that would have been in a contract for motels that wouldn't have been used, right? So sometimes it's waiting it out. I mean, sometimes we don't have the data. We talk about the challenges with the housing market, but we don't have a lot of resource to quantify that and to be able to talk about the number of units that really are within the affordable range compared to the number of families that are seeking housing, or the number of families that are being turned down by landlords and why they're being turned down by landlords. Like those are information that would be helpful to us to talk about the constraints that we have around the rapid rehousing program. Take the focus away from motels.
So have you thought about a research partnership with Sorensen or whoever that's really focused on that actual topic area, rapid rehousing motels? Like usually, and do they need to find funding? Like, what are the constraints with that? Because there you need people to go out and do focus groups and qualitative studies, or
I agree.
Along with
I think we find ourselves in this cycle where, yeah, we're talking about it all the time, but nothing is moving on it because the stakeholders are sort of distracted or focusing on other things. And so we have, in fact, we met with one of the researchers, our lead housing researcher, and talked about this. But, they're focusing on the big picture of lack of affordable housing, and we're finding it hard to get the resources to focus on sort of this subset.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's going to be the beginning and the end of our story today, which is going to bring us right back to this place of getting resources for that broader, deeper research design that can really help inform us of what's happening. So what I just thought of it now, or else I would have sent the article out, but a couple of years ago, there were economists that must have had free time and money. I'm not sure why they did this study, but they were looking at Chicago data, and it was actually 2-in-1 data. And what they were looking at was the connection or effectiveness of prevention dollars to prevent homelessness. And so what they saw by looking at 2-in-1 data over 700,000 people, I don't know if it's people, but instances of prevention dollars being given. So it's over a year and Chicago, a lot of prevention. So it's all types of sources of prevention dollars, right? It's not just one, not just HUD's prevention dollars. And that what they found is that there were times when prevention dollars were almost all the way used up, and not a lot going out, and then times when a lot was going out, and they could track it. So just the output of prevention dollars, and they could track it. And they were able then to create a kind of virtual matching group with the people who did receive prevention dollars, right? Because requests are still coming in. People are still needing it. But they're able to track that trend of people who are getting prevention dollars and the trends of homelessness. And they were able to draw, because they use their fancy econometrics, but they're in a very sophisticated study design. But because they were able to say what would have happened to these families if they didn't get this, and then what happened to the families when it did happen, and they were actually able to see the correlation with the prevention of homelessness with the prevention dollars, because they have large enough data sets and a large enough flow. I'll send this article out to everybody so you can see it. But what it allowed people in Chicago, whether it impacts how they do prevention or not, but it actually allowed a very big piece of evidence to get put down on the table to say, yes, prevention especially when targeted to the most fragile families, can work to prevent homelessness. So go out and target your prevention dollars to those families who most need it. But the rigorous design allowed that to happen. And whether it's then messaged throughout the media, I'm not sure. But how do we get economists and other researchers at our table and partner with us so we can actually draw some of this causality connections? There you go. We're going to end with that same question. But in the meantime, there's a lot we can do. And so one of the things we want to do is really go through these steps of making sure everyone's doing this, but making sure we are looking at questions about trends and really focusing on questions, right? This number 4 should be number 1, avoid drawing quick conclusions, keep generating questions. And questions are really going to lead us to solutions. But that's really our goal with both HMIS, but also the identified other related data sources. And we want to start looking for patterns both in our HMIS data and also what's happening in other data sources. And remember the title, this is really looking at secondary data sources. So what we're saying is take HMIS data and with your stakeholders, step back and start generating the questions and the identified data sources that can help you look at what that issue is beyond just HMIS. And I think everybody's doing that, and I don't think we do it enough, though. Really, the very highest level of data analysis is the use of multiple data sources. Sometimes it's also multiple data analysis methods that are combined that represent multiple data sources. But it's really that we're working with very complex issues, and we really want to push ourselves to start validating what's happening with other sources besides just HMIS. And there's many ways to do that, like a focus group or looking at past research or qualitative surveys. Those cost money, as you know. Secondary data sources, though, are out there for us to use and look at, and they've already been published. They've already been analyzed, or they're sitting there for us to look at. So some of the typical types of secondary data sources, and we're going to look at some of these. The biggest one that I use all the time, like 3 times a week, I just want to hear from everybody, the HUD COC subpopulation reports. I mean, I'm looking nationally, so I guess if you're just working in your own COC area, maybe you're not going to it as often. But I look at it all the time. Does anyone else go to that HUD COC site on the HDX? No, but I can see why you wouldn't. You wouldn't necessarily have to. But if you're wanting to look at comparatively what's happening in other places, it's like a very, very, very wonderful way and place to go to it's the point in time count data, as you know. But anyway, I highly recommend it. We're going to spend a lot of time looking at the Eviction Lab, which is Matthew Jesmond's latest work and output, and we're going to look at a couple examples of other data sources that are secondary data sets useful to us. I sent out an email just before this call and linked you all up with the handout that we created on secondary data sources. Did everybody get this email, I hope? This is really an amazing, I personally love data resources. This is an amazing handout. So did you guys get it? Looks like this.
Yeah, I got it.
So honestly, put this somewhere where you can go back to. Like these are really important links to data sources that you may be using now or may not be. Some of which we'll talk about today. Most we're not going to get to, but they're all worthy to help us have a better understanding of what's happening in our area around different topics. And so a lot of folks on my team spent time reviewing this, compiling and reviewing. But this is super helpful on what secondary data sources might be helpful to us. So even if you spent like 15 minutes opening up each of those links to get a better sense of what it is, so you can go back to it, that would work also. But this is a really, really good handout. It's really valuable. You could copy it and make as many and add on to as many of them as you want, but definitely utilize it is what I would say. I'm gonna really fly through a couple ones that I find extremely useful beyond the HUD COC subpopulation reports that no one else seems to care about. But we do this in our training now, actually, the American Community Survey data, to get people looking at that. How many people on the call here have used going into the American Community Survey data?
Occasionally.
Good.
Prince George's uses it a lot.
Who does?
Prince George's.
Oh, Prince George's, is this Kay? Who's here from Prince George's?
Renee.
Oh, hey,
it's
Renee.
Hey.
Yes. So you go here a lot to the advanced search? And
we do a lot of advanced searches. We use it a lot for grants, for project development, for data dives to work with our Office on Planning, particularly looking right now at the elderly, the mounting elderly, and doing forecasting for shelter needs and housing needs. So we use a lot.
Wow. You know, so Renee's position is with the county government, and she's got a position over multiple departments, which also lends itself to using this American Community Survey data for these various reasons. But even that, like on the elderly, even your 55 and older issue that you were bringing up, Michelle, I don't have time, or I would go into it now, but go spend time going into, so you're going to go to Fact Finder, and you always want to go to advanced search. And from advanced search, it's going to look like this. You go into topics, and you pick the topics that you want. Okay. Here's what I want to do. If any, I don't want to use the time here, but if anybody's really interested in going into Fact Finder and they are not able to get into it by playing with it themselves, then send me an email, and we can. I have a training on it that I did for SAMHSA on the use of Fact Finder. But this is so important to just get it's like really to get familiar with flying through it, because it's so useful. It'll spit up. So here's a report. These reports you can download. You can actually map. You can download into Excel and do analysis with. But this is a report I just ran today, and I told it I wanted all the places in Connecticut, and I wanted to look at poverty here by age, and I also picked disability. Like down below, it's going to say all sorts of stuff. Oh, and this is insurance, health insurance coverage, right? So you get to choose what topic areas, and it's going to tell you by your places that you chose what the numbers are and the percentage here. Well, actually, it's not showing you a rate, but you can create that in your own Excel output because you have the denominators up here and the numerators. But it's really, 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 really powerful. So I'm just going to state, because I want us to actually leave here with a really working knowledge of the eviction lab data sets. But on this one, if anyone wants me to spend 15 minutes with them, that's all it would take on the American Community Survey Fact Finder stuff, then please just email me. But I urge you to dive in for exactly what Renee said, for background information of what's going on, to be able to see trends over time in your area around a lot of both by age, by poverty, by disability, education, health insurance. They do it annually. It's our census data, and they do it annually, the survey. The other one I use all the time is the Kaiser Family Foundation State House facts. This is what it looks like. This is really, really for all of us also to be able to go into and get a sense of what's happening in our own state around our own Medicaid issue, around our own, if we've expanded to Medicaid or Medicaid waivers, our own coverage, insurance costs. It's like, so it's just, it's updated constantly, and it's full of incredibly great and accessible information. Almost too much information. This one, you won't need my guidance. This one, you just go in and start finding out what you want. I mostly go into the Medicaid one here by state, but it really helps better understand what's happening, again, which we all need to be cognizant of. In Indiana, for instance, in the Medicaid, I don't even know if you're an expansion state or not. What does that mean? And this site can help you know that instantaneously. Has anyone used Kaiser Family Health secondary data? No. So please, 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 really, really, really spend just a few minutes playing with this one also. What I really want to dive into today, interactively, and even with your own computers, for you to go into the eviction lab. How many people have gone into this website?
I have.
Great. That's D, I think. So this website, like, this website's just amazing, and it's amazing how quickly, like, Matthew Desmond wrote Evicted in Harvard at the time. Evicted came out, what, 2 years ago, I think? I have the book right here. And you heard him. How many people heard Matthew Desmond talk on NPR or present? 2016 it came out on Evicted. How many people have heard him talk or heard of his book, Evicted? I'm just going to say everybody.
He's come out to Utah. He presented at the Utah Housing Coalition meeting last year.
Yeah. He reminds me of literally a combination when homelessness was getting a lot of publicity. We had Samson Barrett from Pathways going nationally. We had Dennis Philhane, like, everywhere. And we had Phil Mangano, whether you like him or not. He was everywhere. And we had these people, and Lloyd Pendleton from Utah. But we had these people, these, like, faces making it nationally known what's going on, what's working in homelessness, and really that Housing First works, right? But Matthew Desmond is the face for eviction in that same way. And he's now gone to Princeton, and he's pulled together this one of the most incredible websites I've ever seen in all of my 61 years. I just turned 61, so freaking old. Okay, so we're going to go to his website. And honestly, if you could go on your own computer now, because we're just going to talk about it for a minute, and I'd really love everybody to leave here having gone to this website. So I have it up on mine. So this is the first thing you see, Eviction Lab. And then you want to get started. And underneath each of these is incredible. Underneath each of these links, it's really incredible. So we're going to start with eviction rankings, and then we're going to go to map data, because this is really, really interesting. I guess we should just stay looking at my computer and you go play with it after, because I want to ask, so if you look at the top large cities with eviction, the rates here, so you can see North Charleston, South Carolina is the first, Richmond, Hampton, Newport News. Any trends come to mind, like when you look at these?
Virginia's in trouble.
Yeah, like what's going on with Virginia, exactly. And then also South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Indiana's like got problems too there, Michelle, you got to deal with. I mean, Melissa. That, like these eviction rates here, as you can come down farther when you're looking. So you can see again the trends of North Carolina. So Virginia, North Carolina, Indiana, and then we start with Connecticut, like top 3 cities in Connecticut have high eviction rates, relatively speaking here. So it's really interesting just to see what's happening in these, what these top rates are and where they're happening, right? But the data that we want to look at is this is what you're going to spend the most time with, and is the map and data part. It's also like look at this design. Oh my lordy. So here's what you get to do, right? You get to pick a place. So what place do we want to look? Salt Lake County? So it's giving us the eviction rate of Salt Lake County is, wow, wicked low, right? 1.4%. You have like, I don't know, you have good ethics there about eviction.
No, it's not true. I mean, I think a big thing that when I see that, I think we actually think we live in a state where our state legislature definitely errs on the side of the landlord, not the tenant. And a lot of the people that we work with, we help them to move to avoid the full legal eviction. So they're not on the record as being legally evicted. And I think that affects the numbers in terms of the population we're serving.
How would it show up here? Like, well, okay, so you can see Salt Lake City is very similar to Salt Lake County. Like what other Utah Avenue, these are on New Jersey. I guess we're not going to see it here.
I mean, I'm assuming this is pulled from court records, right?
Well, okay, we're going to look at this. So this both eviction per day and eviction rates. So it's court records, but there's also the number of evictions filed, right? Yeah, so it must be, so they also have that number. We're going to go to it. It's just so interesting though. Okay, then let's do comparative. We already know Richmond's terrible, and we're going to be looking at Richmond, but we'll just put it in here.
Wow.
This is a little scary.
And then where else should we look? Indianapolis, because we just saw Indianapolis not so good either. And it's just looking at this information, right? It's showing you like how far it is above the U.S. average, right? There's an indication, right? And in comparison, I just love that it right now allows you to do this, right? You have the map, you get to choose where to go, and it gives you the capacity to compare right away what's going on. And then down here, oh my God, look what you get to do. You get to share this, you get to download reports, or you get to go get more data. So we're going to get the data. And then I've had to do this. This is now my 4th time. They have a problem here on this. But anyway, just keep writing your name in there. So here's the data. Here's the actual data itself. And so let's go down to Utah here. And they do, well, I'm going to show you what I discovered in this data set. So the CSV file is the Excel file, right? So here's cities, here's blocks, here's counties, and here's the states, and then tracks. So I thought it would be most interesting, kind of getting at what you were talking about, Michelle, that probably we could see eviction rates better at the block level in Salt Lake City, right? There would be certain blocks where there's a higher eviction rate, or tracks, is that right? Census blocks are so much
I would
smaller.
think so, yeah.
So what happens when you go here to block data, and I'm just doing it to show you, is the data is older. So it's amazing though. I mean, it also shows you last modified 8 days ago. It's just amazing. But the block data is not. So the block data here, we'll just show you right here. Like this even if you knew the block number, which you could find, right? So this is in Beaver, Colorado. The block data only goes up through 2009. So it must be what's just available at the block level, right? Obviously. But so both the block and the track data is only available through 2009. It's still worth looking at. Look at the variation here. Because when you get Excel, this is two things I want to show you because I'm not an Excel whiz at all. But what you want to do is go to View, and you want to freeze the top row, right? So then you can have, except right now I just told it to freeze this row. I didn't want to freeze that row. I want to freeze the title rows here. But you want to freeze the top pane so that you can actually get, you can actually be looking at the data with that top pane, which defines here. This is a top pane, and it tells you what the labels are, right? So just when you're doing this, because we'll all be doing this, right, is you're going to freeze the top row. And the other thing I do really quickly is I just wrap this text. So I really want to see what these are. But the point about the data on, again, for track is this is census box. But anyway, it's only through 2009. But it's still interesting to see, here's the eviction rates. This is a very small, these are small numbers. You can tell they're, and then 1.4. You could go see, I would think for Utah, Salt Lake City, it's still worth looking into to see if there's variation, but it's still very old, right? Very old. So if we go back to our eviction lab information and we go to cities there. And again, what it does is it gives you access to really view the data directly and use it as you can. They have on this site, remember what we're doing here? We're going to freeze it, but they have on this site also so much capacity and support for people to use this data and to create reports and maps. So this is geocoded, which means you could get anyone who knows GIS to map this out by Utah cities if you wanted. So these are all Utah cities, but you can see how this now goes to 2016, right? So if we wanted to map out what the rate changes, eviction rate changes in Salt Lake County or Salt Lake City, we could do that with this data right here. So here's Salt Lake City, right? And if we want to, the other thing I do just so it's easier to see is just highlight the rows that I'm interested in. And so then if we're looking at eviction rates here, what we're looking at, see how small, like here, so tiny. If we went to Richmond, this is all Utah's, but if we went to Richmond, we would see their rates over time, which potentially could get correlated to homelessness, potentially not, because it's hard to, it is more on the census tract level. But going into Eviction Lab here and finding out what the eviction data is in your own site is really incredible. And you want to actually see, like, they have so much information here to share right away with, here's a video to share an educational basis of what's going on. I don't know how you're going to do it in Salt Lake City, but in Indianapolis you could do it because you have rates there that are higher than the national average. And if I were you and Michelle and Dee, and I would actually call Matthew Desmond at the Princeton, he's at Princeton now, and I would ask him about how to dig deeper in eviction rates that you're seeing that impact homelessness in Salt Lake City. Because this is his mission, right? This is what he's doing. So what we want to do with the eviction data mapping is better understand how to use it with our own questions, right? So this is setting up a data case problem that I want us to look at, and I want you to understand why we're going to set this up this way. And this is the fact that we have HMI's data, right? And we have an issue with evictions, and we want to start thinking about how are they correlated to homelessness, which you're already seeing, Michelle. And actually, how do you know your people are coming from evictions?
We don't. We don't have a good way to know that because it's not very common, of course, that somebody shows up with an eviction notice in their hand. They usually couch surf for a while.
Yeah.
It
I
needs,
would also call that, go ahead.
I'm going to say that that's the kind of information that needs to come from coordinated assessment and diversion conversations.
And is it collected in coordinated assessment now?
No.
Whether they were, yeah. Even if it is, it's still difficult, right? Because if you let's say you're couch surfing for 6 months even, would you consider, if someone, it depends how the question's asked about eviction, right? Because eviction led you to couch surfing. But you have to frame it correctly in that way. But I want to tell you that what is in front of us right now when we look at eviction. So because Matthew Desmond has done such a bang-up job on getting eviction impact in front of us, and he's developed a media kit, he's developed this very, very high utility website. I got a call literally because of his great work. I got hooked up to a journalist in Philadelphia from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Because I wrote a paper with the Urban Institute last year. My section was rapid housing, or came out last year. And so this journalist has been uncovering evictions, motivated by Matthew Desmond's work, and uncovering evictions in Philadelphia. And she uncovered that many of the evictions, some number of evictions that she was looking at, were people who had rapid rehousing, and that they held rapid rehousing in their hands, the vouchers, right? So they got referred to rapid rehousing, and then they were evicted. And on top of that, she uncovered, anecdotally in my mind, because it's just a couple of people who were on rapid rehousing and had SSI. So she phrased her issue to me, she's an investigative journalist, as the fact that people with fixed income are getting rapid rehousing without the chance of increasing income and then falling into homelessness. And that's not right. That's what's her issue. So I'm just going to put it out there. What would you guys have said to her?
Well, why does she say people have no chance of increased income? So
right. Yes, very good. Exactly.
That.
Right. So people with SSI are out there living in the world very successfully, and also the adding on either through roommates or other informal market, or even jobs for certain people with SSI are able to actually maintain housing. And right, that statement that they were, anyone with a fixed income on SSI and or TANF, because she called the people who had the City of Philadelphia's homelessness programs, Liz Hirsch, and talked with her and found out that they, out of the 6,000 people, I think it was 6,000 people that were homeless in Philadelphia, 400 of them got rapid rehousing. 450 got rep housing. And then Liz gave her, because she knew from HMIS the percentage who got rep housing, who had TANF, and who had an SMI. And so for her, these are numbers, a percentage. I can't remember exactly, but let's say it was a third of the people who are rep housing on TANF or SSI. And the journalist is seeing it as, again, is this the right thing? Eviction is really harmful. So this case study came from that. I want to I also talked to her for a long time about the complexities and the same thing of people on SSI and TANF are able to successfully change your income situations in many different ways, and also the complexity of how we look at the data. But I wanted to set up a data case using Richmond as an example, because I have information on Richmond. Richmond does not have this issue. This is fake, 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 fake. And Margot, but anyway, Richmond does not have this issue. This is a data case just to set it up for how we would look at this data, right? So because Richmond is such a high eviction rate, there's information telling us that there's actually 17 evictions a day, and over the year, over 6,000. They also know that over 500 of those evictions were from public housing itself. And they also know that the median rent of people who are evicted in general was $686. The median rent for people evicted from public housing was even less than half of that, as to be expected, right, for public housing. So it's really just setting up a framework and a case for us to think through here. This is talking about how the public housing evictions were, their median amount was $328 that was owed. And that 9% of the eviction judgments were from Public Housing Authority. So what I want to do is kind of walk us through the process of how we would then, so we have an issue, we've seen a trend, right, through evictions here, and then it's how do we arc it back, really what just happened if the journalist called you, and what just happened there, how would we arc it back in this process where we step back and generate questions and identify data sources that can help us understand what's happening, what would we look at, and how would we look at it. So I want to jump to this next slide because I want to tell you what I do. I also step back always and look at what other resources can inform me on the issue itself. And so this resource here, I think we may have talked about it on another call, I'm not sure. I think we did. The Joint Center for Housing Studies, the State of the Nation's Housing 2018. This is also sent to you all today. This is a phenomenal background piece updated annually by Harvard and on the state of the nation, but chapter 6 is always on housing challenges. How many people use this as background information for anything they're working on? So this is the chapter here. And I urge you highly all to read it. It's very readable. It's not that long, chapter 6. And it really frames out so well the housing issue. It's on a national basis, but those are the same issues that are, like you were saying, you don't know, Michelle, how many people are in need of housing assistance that are actually getting it in Utah. But this larger national framing of what's happening in the trends is in this chapter 6. And they have amazing, you just source them, but you can actually use their graphs and outputs. So they have an upturn in homelessness section here. And this is it, right? I'm showing you this because I want you to all read it. Like, this is very, very, very short. But you'll be able to use this background information in framing out any of your topics on the housing challenges that face our populations that we're serving. But it's an amazing, it's again updated annually, and it's always an amazing resource and obviously highly regarded. They also have a if you go to their website, the Joint Center for Housing Studies, this Friday is their 30th anniversary, I believe, and they have a call talking about all 30 years of trends. If anybody has time on Friday, it's their 30 years of the nation's housing report. So definitely jump on the call if you can. And then the other thing I do, I actually did this, I Googled evictions homelessness to see what else is coming up. And there are a couple articles, Matthew Desmond's out there, his articles are in there. Also, this one, eviction, America's experiencing eviction epidemic. I also went to Google Scholar because I do, just to see if there are any studies that were showing the percentage of people that came to homelessness from evictions. That was very brief, and I didn't find anything in the very 5 seconds that I looked. But this is important for us to go back to the data that we need for the larger understanding before or alongside us drilling into the questions and data questions. So these are my questions around this issue, right? Like in Philadelphia, what they now have a journalist that wants to expose returns to homelessness for rapid rehousing households that got SSI, and she's a very good listener, but she's definitely on the bench she's driven to want to uncover the data that can show her the way, or the anecdotal stories that can show her the way, right? So what would we do? If this is our site, if this is Richmond, or this is Salt Lake City, or this is Indianapolis, or St. Louis, how would we deal with this? Or Prince George's County, like what would we do?
I mean, I guess if you're going to look at how rapid rehousing is going one way or another, I'd want to know what the other outcomes are. So how much rapid rehousing is happening, how many folks are staying, how many people are getting into housing on their own. I guess to me, that's the first question. Like, what's the spectrum of outcomes? So obviously some of them are going to get evicted, over thousands and thousands of people, but how many?
So you'd want to get a picture of the whole picture of what's going on in rapid rehousing by the number of people entering, the number of people successfully exiting, the number of people that come back over a period of time, and then maybe some characteristics of those populations.
Right, because it's somewhere between a trivial observation, like, 2 people out of 100 end up getting evicted. Like that's not that. Yeah, like it's going to happen from time to time, and maybe we need programs to deal with that. But if it's 70 people out of 100, that's a very different story. So denominator, right?
Yep. Right.
You could also look at the income levels for those who are moved out on rapid rehousing and find out what the rates of return to homelessness are based on those income levels.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
If Social Security receivers, and that's their singular source of income, if they have a higher rate of evictions than anybody else.
I think the other piece would be what is the point in time of looking at when someone is evicted, and where is the preeminent majority of the evictions occurring? Is it 0 to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18? What's the time frame that they're looking at? And so you can begin to do some predictive analytics around where the best intervention might occur, or where, so for example, if we're looking at a system where our recidivism has a spike in 0 to 6 and a spike in 12 to 18, and follow-up ends at 0 to 12, and there's a spike once that follow-up ends, there may be a business case for figuring out how to do some expanded follow-up to cover the 12 to 18, to cover a spike, but you don't know where those spikes are occurring. The other question I would have is it just RRH, HUD-funded RRH in the COC programmatic terminology, or is it rapid rehousing in the broader sense of you're on the street and now we're rehousing you, and whether that functions in a crisis mode that's in an emergency solutions grant or some other framework besides a HUD environment. And when you look at the entire spectrum of RRH, is it really as big of a problem as it may appear to be?
Mm-hmm. And I liked how you actually went right to a solution right there. Like you pointed the energy is also to finding a solution, like find out where like it is happening and where you're saying where eviction's happening in the time periods where you could target prevention best. Like that's a real wonderful shift of energy. Finding the data sources to help us understand that goes back to earlier questions of like, how do we know when evictions are happening? Like most of these evictions in Richmond did not end up in housing court. So it's not like you can just go to housing court to figure it out, this information. Any other thoughts on what else you would do in generating questions and data sources? There isn't a right or wrong, you know, there's no right or wrong here. Like what we're doing is like, it's a conundrum. It's actually a very real conundrum, right? That is actually happening in Philadelphia right now. And where first you're generating questions, and then you want to start thinking through where could we get the data, like around evictions. Like, and the more stakeholders you have at the table helping you think this through, and a direct phone call to Matthew Desmond, who's like, gotta have ideas on where you could get eviction data, because that's his life science now, then the better off you are, right? This is not a singular exercise. It's really bringing people together around the table and starting together to generate questions. Even with the journal, like I did evoke questions from the journalist herself too, because you don't want to just be in judgment, but just you kind of want to be together on trying to solve an issue you both care about coming at from different angles. But really generating questions and working together to identify data sources is really key. Another really key point is making sure when you do identify the data elements you're going to use in any analysis, make sure you understand how they've been collected in that what we have control over, which is HMIS, really understand if we're going to look at, I don't know, move-in dates for wrap-rate housing, or we're going to look at disabling condition. How is that data element collected in our COC? And people, it's amazing to me, people really tend to know what data elements have reliability, which don't in their COCs. But it's really important, and then it's really important to explain that, what data elements you're using and why, and their limitations to that stakeholder group around the table. So you're working with, from the get-go, you're working with limitations. You want to make them visible to the group as much as you can, not because it just helps with the deeper thinking in the analysis process. But you know, here, like do what you said, like you could look at zero income, or you could look at by SMI, you could look at by disabling condition, you could look at by prior shelter history, or you could look at all of them. And then what would we do with the findings? Kind of that, like if we found that 20% of all households that returned to homelessness from refugee housing were on SSI, then what do we do with that? Or a combination. One of the things we do is look back to the literature to see what's like right now, because refugee housing was what I did my dissertation on. I know that literature, and I know the prior shelter history is the one factor that's correlated with returns to homelessness over and over and over again. In fact, Rachel, I need to send you Jason Rodriguez's latest study published last year on refugee housing returns that shows that fact again, and then also that Chicago study. But you do want to know the literature. It's not hard to know it. It's not hard. It's not hard to know. You don't have to go and do a big analysis to get at. There are some seminal research studies on our few program types in homelessness. So you want to know that literature. You want to know what that rigorous evaluation's already been showing as far as factors on return to homelessness for refugee housing populations, because it will help you look at that data in the way that we have, which is, again, through a limited lens. But the biggest question is, so you find out that there's going to be, and there is going to be, a percentage of people on rapid rehousing who have, not SMI, it's SSI. So SMI is my other study, shared mouth appointment. But SSI, there are going to be people who have SSI, there are going to be people on systemic, there are going to be people on TANF, there are going to be people who could be deemed to be seen as fixed income. And there are also very, very, very real ways to improve our systems, that housing stabilization may not be happening. And I have heard this from other people in Philadelphia, honestly, about rapid housing, that program may not be being run as well as it could be compared to how it was run in the past. And that there are ways that we can look at our system to improve it, right? Using the data is the whole point of our data action cycle. So what would we do, though, with the information that we find if it shows this information that kind of confirms the journalist's expectations? It's a hypothetical. Well,
sorry, Jamie.
Go back.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah.
The question.
So what would we do if you run the data and you see that 20% of all households that did return to homelessness from rapid housing were on SSI? What would we do with that? What would we do with that finding? And what did that finding even tell us fully? So here's the thing, and this is like the biggest takeaway from our time together. It's where we started, is we have to formulate research partners for those larger questions, because we don't know. We actually don't know from our analysis, when we're going to advanced analysis and we have rapid cycle evaluation, we don't know. That correlation connection might be superficial, right? The correlation does not mean causation. And we have to, across the country, connect in research partners in a way that can activate, they're activated around the questions with us. And the funding it will take to make that happen has to be found as a group effort, because they have lots of, Tim can talk to that better at the university level, but they have ways to find money for analysis that I think could be helpful in the short term. It's not like you have to have a $3.2 million RCT study, but there are things that can happen. But we're at great risk if we are the final analysis of the data showing that 20% of all households returned were on SSI. It doesn't tell us enough of what we need to know, and of what we need to know to drive any kind of mid-course corrections, right, that we want to be working on. So it's really what we just started with Michelle talking about the researchers that they've tried to bring on with that motel rapid rehousing issue, and not been able to actually get them to pay attention, to dig deeper in the things that you need them to. So it's like we have to go forward and we have to do analysis with HMIs alone. We have an opportunity to strengthen that analysis by looking at secondary data sets, to use the resources that we sense and beyond, but really to formulate the deeper understanding of the very, very, very complex issues happening in our communities around homelessness. We have to get really serious about research partners. I don't have answers to that. That's locally, but yeah. So I want to leave on a high point, but I can't actually. I do know that Dennis Cohane's working on this great project, bringing together a pilot site, because we have this big unsheltered issue, right, that everybody's focused on now, HUD, USICH, NAEA, and they are talking about creating pilot sites and getting foundation funding for these collaborative partners that bring researchers together, the COC leadership, cross-sector leadership, and clients around the table, using data, longitudinal data, and real-time data with our Green River folks, hopefully, is the plan, to be doing innovative investigations. So you create an innovation and then you monitor it for change and you see whether it's working or not. So it's that rapid cycle evaluation, but it's with those partners who can help us do it in a more rigorous level. But we're a part of it. We're all a part of it, and that's a really amazing model that whether you're chosen to be a pilot site or not, maybe Salt Lake City might be, but who knows? Like I'm not in that circle deciding that. But if you're not, you still can model it. And so I'll talk more about that, like what that model looks like, because I'm talking more to Dennis about where his sites are going to go. But it's something we all have to be doing, actually. So kind of a happier note, maybe not so much happier, but anyway, this is our colleague at Clubber, Sarah Khan, who most of you know. Sarah is co-developing. We started it actually out of the, not community practice, but out of the data maturity training. We started a data maturity assessment tool, and HUD really took off on it. We're now developing it into a URL, and that data maturity assessment tool is to really give you a sense of where you are and where you want to be around these assessment topics: data quality, data literacy, committed leadership, system monitoring, data-informed system improvement. So it's a tool that may or may not have impact. We hope it does. We hope it might set some understanding. It's also linked to resources. We piloted actually in one of our trainings. We piloted the first prototype of it, and the women said, "Well, so what? I know that I've got to move up in a different level to be a higher performing person. So what? What do I do?" And that really motivated us to connect resources to any of the findings. There's a plethora of resources now that are going to get linked. You could go off and use. And so what Sarah's asking me to do is, you guys are willing to be guinea pigs. On Monday, September 24th, she would mail it out with a request for you to review it, to kind of take it with a couple of people and help us better understand, is this of utility to the field, and how can we improve it? We're testing it out at NHSBC in Portland also, so this is getting it ready for NHSBC, and it's iterative. But are you guys willing to do that for Sarah? She's a very nice person.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Great. Perfect. It's like not like a 4-day turnaround because of the NHSBC prep, but it's enough to do it. Sit down with a few friends. So we'll get that out. She'll get that out on the 24th, and then this is my homework. I don't know about this. I think for homework, you should just work on the secondary data sets and see what you're finding. And I am interested in this myself on Iraqi housing returns in the past 12 months. If you wanted to go look at that, I think it'd be really interesting. You also want to look at the number of households who have all three or all two or any two of the above, right? Both SSI and prior shelter returns. Anyway, part of it is to see what can we do with the data we have without the rigorous analytic capacity for matching. So that's there for homework that no one ever gets to, but we're going to send out some emails reminding folks. And we have our next community practice, October 2nd, coming up at 3 o'clock, and that's where we're going to talk about shared housing, which is like super high utility and super, I think. So I wish there was more. I hope you guys actually use these data tools so that they can start becoming parts of your work framework that help support whatever messaging and challenges you have ahead. That's my wish. And let's just go around the room like one more time, like really quick. Like, what's one thing you're hoping for with the secondary data sets? I'm going to start with Dee, because you were first. Dee, what are you hoping for with secondary data sets?
So you're asking what other data sets we're hoping to find or look for?
No, how you're hoping to use it. Whatever comes to mind around the use of secondary data sets.
We working with the shelter population and those in housing, we're always interested in finding out what are the common factors in, like I'm very interested in doing that research that you just pointed out about the income levels and disabilities for those who are returning to rapid rehousing. So I think we'd be able to put that together and have some very good information, and I'm excited to use that, but because we're always interested in knowing what are the causes of that returns to homelessness. And it's always relatively anecdotal, but if we can put some data behind that, that can help guide us quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Good. Okay, Melissa from Indianapolis.
Yeah, so working with other members of CHIP, I know that they knew eviction rate was pretty high in Indianapolis, and we're not happy to report that. So I'm hoping by passing on these materials and hopefully getting more people on this call that they'll come up with new questions to explore, because I think they're a very curious group.
Mm-hmm. Great. It would be great, Melissa, to get more people on the call too. I think the shared housing topic also will be really a high utility to folks out there. And Michelle?
Yeah, I'm really, I've been really just interested in all these other data sources that you've shared with us today, and it makes me think how I can pull that information together, how we as a community can pull that information together to achieve our objective of creating a stronger data leadership group and showing them what the opportunities are if we come together in that way, and using all these different sets of data to help improve our system.
Great. And Tim?
Yeah, there are two things. I'm super excited in St. Louis. There's this regional data sharing network that's evolving with a bunch of super passionate folks, and they're just like starting to identify all these different data sources from all these different sectors. And then I just wanted to say something in the spirit of the community of practice part of this, that my expertise actually lies in and around qualitative data collection. And so if any of you is interested in talking through how to partner with like universities, basically if you find something in your quantitative data but you don't know the texture of it and you want to trigger like a series of focus groups or interviews that allows you to like assess it in a real nuanced way at the local level, that's something I'd love to chat with folks about. So just know that I'm a resource with regard to kind of pivoting to generating your own data at a local level in a qualitative way.
I think that's November's community. That's great.
I'll put something together.
Yeah, for real. For real. It'd be great. But call him. If you definitely email Tim if you need something sooner than later. That would be great. Renee?
So that additional site that you pointed out with the eviction data is fairly interesting, looking at regional comparables where we sit relative to the region. It was interesting to find that some of the jurisdictions that border us don't have data in that system. So there's a bit of a little bit of a conundrum there in terms of who we look at and policies related to that. But some of the data, digging down some of the policy practice implications for the analytics for us are three that come immediately to mind. One is particularly evictions from public housing and Section 8 housing, because we are working now on a practice model, integrated practice model with the Department of Housing and Housing Authority here locally and the COC around first-time interventions. So at the point of the initial alert or warning letter or escalation from housing prior to it ever elevating to an eviction, looking at a rapid response team that actually does forward work around preventing that person, getting involved with the family and preventing that eviction from actually taking place, because once they drop into homelessness, you sort of get a higher level problem with one less tool in the toolkit. for long-term solutions. So we've already been working with Housing Authority on that, and being able to look and dig down into some of the data, particularly around the housing authority, that I think is something that can feed narrative. The other piece that we're looking at with a data sharing agreement across all of our platforms, including our RMS and public safety and sheriffs and data and evictions that are already reported. We've been talking a little bit about predictive analytics and going into the eviction data to identify patterns of patterns where you can predict who's going to become the next high system utilizer in your homeless system based on patterns of eviction and elements impacting that eviction, and how can you use that and apply it in a broader set. So at the point of first or second eviction in court, you have a diversionary system that does some long-term prevention that sort of puts a barrier up to high system, for people dropping into high system utilizers become much more costly. And what I found interesting in that eviction piece, and I don't know if anybody ever looked at that for their community, is our evictions were like, I don't know, 3,000, 4,000, something like that. But the evictions served were like 134,000, like a huge number.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they didn't actually result in an eviction, what is happening in the policy and practice at the local level, and what are the dollars associated with the workload attached to that 134,000, that if we could identify ways to minimize those legal interruptions and the repetitive trauma of families, and we can intervene earlier, where's the cost savings in that? Can we quantify it? And is there a way to use that cost savings to do work differently in the court system that may actually help our families? So those are just some things that I thought about immediately on application for the data.
Yeah, look at that. Well, we definitely have a year ahead of us in the community practice. Lots of stuff to discover, because you just brought up lots of great topics for us. So thank you to everyone, and we'll see you next month and talk in between now and then with most of you, actually. So thank you. And
thank you, Jamie. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.